We're back on a special edition of the Opinion Show, which we're calling the Endorsement Show, as we discuss some of the decisions made by the editorial board of the Plain Dealer and the Northeast Ohio Media Group in this election season. Next up, we're going to talk about the county executives race, where we have two non-office holders. Well, actually, Armand Budish is an office holder, but it's not an incumbency that's running. We have Armand Budish, the Democrat, facing Jack Sharron, the Republican, in a county that is heavily Democrat, and Armand Budish is the heavy favorite. We endorse Jack Sharron. What's our thinking there?
Go ahead. I was particularly impressed by his background, the fact that he's the CEO of a manufacturing company out in Collinwood, Cleveland. I thought he had like a lot more practical ideas and actually talked about what he would do if he had the position. It was a lot about jobs, but also he mentioned some other things about education. He was just far more impressive than I thought that he would be. And I also kind of felt that Armand Budish was kind of riding on, his success as state representative and former Speaker of the House and things like that, and not really telling us, like, well, if I wasn't leading this county, what I would do, and that's.
I think Sharon's absolutely right. I think I've admired Sharron ever since he turned that brownfield into his company headquarters. I mean, he went to a place that, was toxic, and people weren't, and he went in there and he remediated and he invested, and he did what other business leaders should be doing to restore both Cleveland and the county. And my feeling with Budish is that, he's, like Sharron said, he's riding the coattails. He thinks this is a gift. He doesn't really have to do anything, and I have a real problem with him and nursing homes. I think there's a tremendous conflict of interest between what he does professionally as a lawyer and the nursing home lobby.
All right, so he does not represent nursing homes. I think that we have to be clear about that. He represents, in his private practice, people who are, facing, end-of-life issues and how to navigate. So, I honestly think that's not an issue that we really considered in this. In fact, he's a nice, decent guy, but what really came across to me in this endorsement interview that surprised me was how kind of nonpartisan Jack Sharron was, who is a Republican, and yet it was clear he regretted that there was going to be an R next to his name on the ballot, because he knew that in this county was going to be a real problem for him. And he was taking positions on issues that were, I thought, actually very progressive and forward-looking about the downtown development and the county's debt, different from the other Republican councilman, Dave Greenspan, who's been a real fiscal hawk on the county council. Next to Armand Budish, who, though I think he's a really decent, very smart guy, he's a very partisan guy, former Speaker of the House, minority leader. And I think that we were concerned that under his leadership, the county could revert to some of its old hiring hall practices for the Democratic Party. So that was a big factor in our thinking about him.
Right, and I think, and the point I think Chris Eve made, and to that point, and Kevin O'Brien made it in his column today, Sharron's going to be able to say no to a lot of things that he should say no. Budish is going to have a lot more pressure on him because he's going to have a lot of people who think that he's beholden to them. So I think it'd be great for this county if we could have a Sharron, let him see what he can do.
The irony here is that what we're looking for is a candidate who will carry on the legacy of the first 2 years of Ed Fitzgerald, who we think is terrible for the governor's office, because Ed Fitzgerald came in and did what needed to be done. He got rid of Deadwood. He laid off party folks that had gotten their jobs who really didn't deserve them. He made a lot of moves, and this is only the second county executive. This is a government that it's in its infancy, and unless it stays in the right direction, we could go back to what we had before when things were pretty corrupt.
There's an irony there where, I think a lot of us were concerned when Fitzgerald announced he was going to run for governor that he was leaving the job half done. But actually, now that we have had all these revelations about his personal judgment issues, I think it's really fortunate for the county that he is moving on, and that, but I do agree with you, Chris, that I do think that this is something that we see in Sharron, but also that Sharron has the ability, much more than Fitzgerald has shown, to reach down to Columbus and get the governor's engagement, similar to the way that Frank Jackson has done that. And actually to be a partner with Frank Jackson, where before you had sort of ego clash between Ed Fitzgerald and Frank Jackson.
It's a critically important election. It
Right,
really does
it really
determine
does.
the direction of the county.
Right.
And it's at least it's what's good is we do have a choice, unlike in the
Right.
governor's race.
And Jack Sharron has a driver's license.
Well, and then Sean also, and we see, there was I saw something the other night, I think it was on one of the news stations, Sean talking about his goals for bringing more business to Cleveland,
He did say
high
he
tech.
would woo a lot.
He understands that. And to what extent a county executive can do that, I'm not so sure. Budish had some ideas too about utilizing Lake Erie and the fresh water that we have. I mean, but Sharron, being a businessman, that aspect is going to be forefront.
Plus, the Republican convention's going to be here.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to hurt to have a Republican as the county executive.
But he is facing incredibly long odds.
Oh, yeah.
And the chances are very strong that Norman Budish will be in office come January.
Though interestingly, this is we pushed to make this one of the very first endorsements that we wrote. And since then, Sharron has really turned around his fundraising
Right,
to where, even though he's still behind Budish, who's a fabulous fundraiser in a Democratic county, why wouldn't he be ahead? But he's really kind of turned things around,
Matt Dolan had a lot of money the last time around.
I agree.
Yeah.
But the final point about Sharron is that he made a point in the endorsement interview to say that he would be the county executive for 8 years if the voters wished it. It's clear he doesn't have political ambitions beyond this office.
Which it's
Yes,
important.
yes.
All right, next thing we're going to talk about, we got a bunch of candidates that are running with familiar last names, and we're thinking a little bit of dynasty in the Ohio House. Let us start with Sarah LaTourette.
Okay.
Who is she related to?
Yeah, exactly.
She's running in the 76th House District. We did endorse her.
Yep.
What's the thinking there?
She impressed us, I think, as someone who was going to go down to Columbus and work in a bipartisan manner and try to affect positive legislation.
All right.
And we also endorsed her in the primary when
Right,
she
we
was
did.
running against a more,
Tea Party.
not Tea Party affiliated, but a person from that perspective.
Janine Boyd running in the State House 9th. What's our thinking there, and who's she related to?
And we talked about this a little bit because we did not endorse her in the primary. But she was clearly the better candidate.
We raised concerns though because her mother, because of illness, has been kind of a ghost-like presence down in Columbus, and that does not serve the people she represents in the Heights. And we were concerned because it did appear that Janine Boyd had the same problem because she missed so many Cleveland Heights City Council meetings. So that was a large part of why we didn't endorse her in the primary, and a concern that we raised in our regular endorsement of her.
Right, but I felt she addressed those concerns in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And to be clear, her mother is Barbara Boyd, and she's a state representative.
Amelia Sykes. Sykes is a long known
Oh
name
my
in the
goodness,
state
yes,
house.
yes.
She's the 34th. What's our thinking there?
Well, she's attempting to take the position of her dad, Vernon Sykes, who's state representative. Her mother has even held that seat as well.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So it is quite a lock on it. But she's a lawyer. She works for Summit County. She's smart and sharp.
Yeah.
She knows the district. She ran against someone who was a community activist, and we did say, good things about her. But in the end, it was just kind of clear that if you wanted someone who could go to Columbus and maybe kind of, get into the business early, that she was a better choice than her.
It was sort of the same thing with Janine Boyd. I mean, there wasn't as much of a learning curve. I mean, it's like they knew Columbus.
Well, that wasn't our
Hope
thinking
so.
though with Amelia Sykes. That was much more that she was simply bright and well prepared for this job, having worked in Summit County as a lawyer and as a public health. That was her area in academically. as she said to us when we endorsed her in the primary, she would be the, one of the rare people with background in public health. And now that we've got the Ebola thing upon us, doesn't that look a little bit prescient?
More relevant.
Yeah.
She takes some raps for being a bit of a carpetbagger. She came back from Atlanta, essentially to position herself to run for her dad's seat. But it's also important to note, Vernon Sykes has been a phenomenal representative for that part of Summit County. He continues to be a big factor in this Constitutional Modernization Commission that's looking at, one of, a potential rewrite of the Ohio Constitution. We're hoping the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in that case.
We did not endorse Nathan Manning, though. That's the one kind of familial connection. What was our thinking there?
Well, that was, I think our thinking there was that part of it is that he would represent some of the same people that his mother will represent if she wins re-election to the Senate. And we were a little concerned that that's a little too much in the family there.
And we like Brendan Mack.
We liked Brendan Mack, and there also was a pretty nasty, gnarly political attack ad against Mack in that Nathan Manning said he had nothing to do with, but nonetheless, I think he did use it in a TV ad later to some extent. So those were two of the big issues. Brendan Mackin's got a lot of experience as a prosecutor, as a judge advocate general in the Air Force, I believe. Seems like a very stand-up guy. I think he would make a good legislator. Nathan Manning was a good guy too, solid, a lot younger. I forget how old he was, in his 30s. And I think for all those reasons, it wasn't a slam dunk for Brendan Mack, and I think Nathan Manning is a good guy. But again, he's kind of getting into the family business. And not only that, but he would, like I say, they'd be representing some of the same people.
We had a similar situation in one judicial race. Richard McMonagle is a longtime Cuyahoga County judge, well regarded, and Matthew McGonigal is running for the seat against a Shannon Gallagher, who has a Irish name, and we endorsed Mr. McMonagle.
We endorsed Matthew McMonagle, I think, for a couple reasons. First of all, good guy, well-spoken, lots of trial experience with Kelly and Ferraro, most of it workers' comp related, connected to the mesothelioma and a lot of the asbestos cases. A lot of trial experience. He had also been a magistrate, I believe, Rocky River for about a year. Shannon Gallagher.
How much trial experience did she have?
She didn't have any, really, to speak
She's got a great name.
Now, but her uncle is an appeals court judge. Her father is Danny Gallagher, who's actually in prison now, tied up in the corruption probe. We didn't use that against her. I really can say that honestly. I liked her. In fact, we endorsed her in the Democratic primary, and I think she's bright. She's young. She's only like 35, and I think she probably does good work as a brief writer, an opinion writer, and helping out the judge Eileen Gallagher, who's no relation to her, on the appeals court where Shannon works. I think if she gets some trial experience, puts her nose to the grindstone in that regard, I think she could probably be a judge one day. But I think clearly Matthew McMonagle, this was not too difficult a decision.
She had some experience with another judge too. Who was that?
Well, she also worked, I think her very first job out of law school, she worked about 6 months with Bridget McCafferty. According to Shannon, she was placed with Bridget. Now, she knew her, but because she knew a lot of the judges. She'd been an adult probation officer. Yeah. She says that she was put there, that she didn't request to be put there, or she wasn't aware that if Bridget had requested her. Who knows exactly how it all came down, but...
Bridget McCafferty's another official.
Right, and this was several years ago. This was, I want to say, 2002, 2004, something
Before,
like
that.
The other thing that should be noted about that race is those two people possess two of the most potent judicial ballot names in Cuyahoga County, and their defense against the name game when we asked them about it is, well, we cancel each other out.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is Matthew McMonagle's father, Richard McMonagle, a longtime judge, very well liked, very well respected. I mean, that's gonna help his son in that regard.
But
on the other
the problem
hand,
with
being a Republican makes it much more difficult to be elected judge in this county.
Right,
So,
right.
so that
The Democratic
Can bounce.
postcard came out.
That's
of
right.
And I think a
This will be
lot
an
of
interesting one to watch.
voters don't have the kind of knowledge like that you have, Pete. And so again, that's where the name game comes
Yeah.
in.
Betsy, there's a Supreme Court race where we have some unusual situations with how the fellow lawyers feel about the candidates. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that was actually a very tough one for us. I mean, we have two contested Supreme Court races. In one of them, the incumbent and the challenger are both highly recommended by the Ohio State Bar Association. We ended up endorsing John O'Donnell from Cuyahoga County, who's the challenger. In the other race, Tom Letson, who's the Democratic challenger, who's a term-limited state representative, was not recommended by the Ohio State Bar Association Raiders, meaning that they did not think he was qualified to become Supreme Court Justice. Sharron Kennedy, who is the incumbent, was elected 4 years ago, despite the fact that she was rated not recommended. And given that recommendation, she didn't even go before them for a rating. Then right before the interview, she had posted answers to a Cincinnati Right to Life questionnaire, in which she revealed that she didn't think that Roe v. Wade was, a legitimate law, and that same-sex marriage shouldn't be allowed. So, does that violate judicial canons? I mean, she has proved to be not bad as a Supreme Court justice. She contended, and we finally decided to accept that at face value, that she was merely exercising First Amendment rights and not allowing herself to be. But I continue to have grave misgivings about a Supreme Court justice who is that open about their personal views about matters of law that are likely to come before them.
Okay, the folks around this table do an extraordinary amount of work in endorsement season. There are dozens and dozens of people that come through. They have to get educated about a whole lot of issues, but it's also a learning experience. They pick up on, through these interviews, issues that are out there that we may not have known much about. And one of those had to do with concerns about the Common Core. So what was learned from candidates about that this time around?
Oh, there was a lot of concern either about Common Core itself and whether or not, I should explain Common Core, the rigorous academic standards that Ohio, the State Board of Ed, passed actually in 2010, but most recently has been in the news because some state representatives are intent on repealing it, and the bill is still, in the hopper and whatever, so it has not gone anywhere. So several candidates, even those who were in favor of it, wondered about the implementation of it and whether or not schools would have enough money to get the computers so that way they could take the tests. And there was also some fear that there might be too much testing already.
That was another thing you heard a lot about, a real resentment at the number of tests.
Yes,
that were being
that's
given.
right.
We did have a lot of candidates who were former teachers or current teachers, and so therefore they're in the classroom and they feel like they know the issues.
This is actually an interesting trend, is all of the teachers or former teachers who are running for office. And I think that is because there is a perception that the state legislature has just simply not stepped forward with sufficient funds for a public education system, and in fact has been siphoning a lot of that money away. Several of the candidates from Summit County, where there is very strong anti-charter school sentiment, were just blanket, let's shut all those charters down. But the Common Core, I think it was interesting because it revealed, at least to me, that there's a great deal of unease out in the community about Common Core. I think the state has to do a much better job of educating. There's a lot of concern in school districts about having sufficient resources to implement, and on top of that, the testing.
Right. But the thing one of the takeaways I had was the number of candidates who felt that this was a government conspiracy.
Yes.
That this was a mandate
Yeah.
that came from the federal government, and they didn't realize that it was a group of governors who initiated
Republican
it.
governors,
Republican
mostly.
governors. I mean, I was surprised. I thought that was...
For the record, the governor himself said he sees no weakening of the Common Core standards and does not believe that bill will go anywhere.
But I think it could be tweaked down there. I do think that, I think both Democrats and Republicans would like to see that. And there's a fella who's running in District 99, Ashtabula County, John Patterson, former teacher. He created the Education Funding Caucus in the House. and they're looking at all kinds of education issues, and that was one of the reasons why I think we endorsed him, is because he can bring maybe some education to the House.
Another topic that has actually been covered a good bit has been the heroin epidemic, but it's something that you heard quite a bit about during these interviews.
Yeah, that was surprising because the candidates who were running for Geauga County Commissioner brought it up, the ones from Medina County Commissioner, Lake County, Lake
And it was as
County.
a cost factor, the cost of
They were
dealing
all
with it?
saying that either that it had hit their counties hard, and that oftentimes they didn't have, some didn't have drug courts, some didn't have enough recovery houses, for people
Or they
who
had
want
it
to,
for women, but they didn't have it for
men.
men.
In Geauga. So there's a lot of concern about, okay, we need to put more money toward this, not just toward law enforcement, but also toward treatment.
Although we had that one candidate who
Yeah,
was
yeah.
saying, yeah, lock them up. But yeah, it was, to me, it was interesting. It was just, there was a real heightened awareness about this problem. And these communities that you would think, like Geauga, for example, the rural, that wouldn't be an issue there. It's a huge issue.
Yeah.
Huge.
And they did talk openly about it, and some campaigned on it, saying, I'm talking about this more than the other candidate, and
Yeah.
it's an important issue.
So that was good to see, I thought.
It's also costing counties money, and also tied up with Medicaid expansion, which has made a lot more Ohioans eligible for the kind of services that drug and alcohol mental health boards provide. So we saw not just renewals, but levy increases on the ballot this November. Summit County has a sales tax increase, aimed specifically at their law enforcement to provide more resources. So.
Right.
What else arose through the discussions? What other subjects did you hear about that were a little bit unexpected?
Well, Sharron and I, when we were interviewing, Geauga County and Portage County candidates
And
Lake County candidates for commissioner, yes, it wasn't Portage so much; it was Lake and Geauga. I heard this very bizarre kind of conspiracy theory that the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency and the Sustainable Communities Consortium, which was a regional planning effort involving, like 18 counties or something, a lot of counties, somehow is seen in at least portions of Geauga and Lake County, or at least by some of the candidates, as a conspiracy, somehow tied into the UN to take over, local government through. I mean, it's really kind of bizarre. But this idea was even, the subset of that was this notion that some of the bigger counties in the region are throwing their weight around and not really paying attention to the rural. We want to keep our slow lifestyle. We don't want bike trails. We don't want, some of these other innovations that actually we as an editorial board think are pretty important for the region.
Well, and this is a topic Steve Litt, the architecture critic at the Plain Dealer, has written volumes about. So if people are curious about what's going on there, there's been no secrecy about it. It's been very transparent.
Right.
But their idea, some of the candidates were also talking about how Cuyahoga County wanted to kind of siphon money off from the more affluent, Lake County and Geauga counties for various projects. So it was all very kind of twisted and unusual.
Well, and the tax too. I think there was a lot of people who felt that the cutting the income tax and then raising the sales tax was kind of a regressive move, and it was really just tax shifting as opposed to giving some kind of meaningful tax cut. That came up several times.
But just going back to the sustainable community thing, I think what we're seeing is a backlash maybe to the idea of regionalism,
Yes.
because that's what Sustainable Communities Consortium was really about. It's a regional planning effort, and there's some people who just who think who don't really see it for what it is, which is a way to save this whole region and allow all of us to become more prosperous, but rather see it as somehow a way to rob them of their lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
agree.
engulf and devour.
And I'm gonna wrap this up by putting each of you on the spot. Give me 30 seconds, your biggest takeaway from this endorsement season. We'll start with Pete.
Biggest takeaway,
Think fast.
think fast. Common Core, a lot of dissatisfaction amongst both Democrats and Republicans. I think only one person kind of unqualified support of Common Core.
Chris, 30 seconds.
And I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think, there's too many elections in this country, and what you have with this cycle, this 2-year cycle, is you have a small pool of candidates. You know, again, we get criticized sometimes for endorsing incumbents or perceived bias, but you're not getting a lot of quality candidates in these races.
Sharron.
Concerned about illegal drug use and abuse across, not just in urban counties where you would expect to have that, but also in rural counties, and you know, even among what you would think were middle-class families, is people saying, hey, I have a neighbor or I know someone who's addicted and there's not a lot of help for this person out here in my county, and there should be.
I would say that my biggest takeaway is the way that the meltdown of the Fitzgerald campaign is bleeding down, not just down ticket to the other statewide races, but all the way down into county commissioner races. Sharron and I heard, you know, from Daniel Troy, who's running for re-election in Lake County, that he's concerned that this could affect his numbers. I'm sure that this is something that a lot of the state House and state Senate candidates are looking at as well.
And my biggest takeaway is that the work that the folks I'm surrounded by do is one of the best public services that we can offer. These endorsement interviews are dynamic. Candidates' feet are held to the fire in a way you don't get anywhere else. And I think we'll continue to expand the public's reach into that, as we did this year by posting the audio. That's it for the endorsement show, a special edition of the Opinion Show. Please share your comments in the post where you find the show on cleveland.com, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.